I'm Jana, the little sister.
And I'm Jeff, her big brother. Welcome to Sibling Rivalry, a podcast about our favorite sport, baseball.
This week, we talk about ways to fill the void until baseball returns.
We share some updates on the proposals from last week.
And remember to visit us at our new website, siblingrivalrybb.com, to find all the places you can listen to Sibling Rivalry Baseball podcasts and links to all our social media platforms and more.
One of the three feasible proposals was the Cactus League and Grapefruit League. So Arizona and Florida. So that way everybody could go to their regular spring training homes. That would take off some of the pressure of everybody being in one location and all of the dealing with where they're going to play. Only having maybe one real major league stadium that they could rotate teams through to play on top of the other things. So just recently, Texas was thrown in as a possible location as a third site.
Right. And Texas has, Arlington, to be specific, has that retractable roof. And I think that these proposals all seem to be precipitated upon the domed stadium, or so they can get as many games in and not worry about whether rain delays, anything like that.
I guess the question is, does it really take the pressure off for the other things that we know are, the driving forces of these plans, which is coronavirus and how all of that works? We know that's the biggest thing. That's the big black cloud over all of this. Does it make it easier to have them in three places so that you need less resources in each place? Or does it place just as big a burden in the whole on those areas? And then with Texas, obviously in Texas, you could play games. There's minor league stadiums around. You've got both Minute Maid Park and the new Globe Life Field to host games, just like you'd have two stadiums in Florida, the one in Arizona. You also cover three time zones then.
The time zone thing is important too, because there's no fans, then it's all going to be on TV, radio. So then that spreads out where people can listen and they're not staying up really late, because Arizona is a lot earlier than obviously the East Coast. So they have their own time zone there kind of thing going, where they never
change.
Yeah, they never change. So that's one thing that I've seen too, is about the time change, the time difference, I guess, in somebody on the East Coast watching a game that starts, say, at 7:00 in Arizona. That's late. But at this point, I don't even know what time it is. So,
well, but now the time zone thing I get, but if you're going to play potentially, especially to make the most out of the major league stadiums, if you're going to play 3 games a day, let's say, it's not going to matter when. You can play the Eastern teams in the middle game of a day, so that way it starts at 5:00.
I don't think it matters anyway. I think these are just things that people are, kind of grasping for straws when it comes to the time zone, because say the Yankees are playing the Angels. Those fans, in California, the Yankee fans are going to watch that game. They're going to stay up and watch it. I don't think that it really matters.
No, it's of all the things to be concerned about, why is that on the list?
Right. But it is one thing I thought I'd bring up, because I've seen it consistently as I've been reading about these different proposals.
Now, what I'm wondering about with this proposal is, how do they end up splitting the teams? Because before it was easy. Arizona's going to have the teams that go to Arizona, the Cactus League teams, the Grapefruit League teams, and eventually they're going to come together. They're only going to play each other in those leagues. There'll be no interleague play, as it were. Now, if you add in a third area, will it just be the Central? Will you now do Western teams, Central teams and Eastern teams. There's
And
30 or 10 teams per site,
right.
which works in one way if you have, if we get down to we're only playing 81 games or somewhere in there, let's just say 80 to 100 games, just having those 10 is fine because you're not going to have any travel other than those teams playing each other. So there's only 9 other teams that they can play before they have to, before you get to a playoffs. And is there really a playoff without some travel? Because you're going to end up with three winners. So unless you take the playoffs is the top 2 teams from Arizona, the top 2 from Texas, the top 2 from Florida, they play it out. Whoever's got the best record of the 3 gets a bye. And then the other 2 teams of the 3 divisions play. And then the team with the bye, they play for the World Series, if you want to call it that. I've seen a lot of people saying if we have a season, you have to have a World Series. Last week, remember, I talked about MLB championship is a thing that I'd heard from two or three different places saying this isn't a regular season, so there shouldn't be a World Series in the traditional sense.
Yeah, I like the MLB championship just because the World Series, when you win, it's going to be great for that team, but it's not going to mean the same. It's not slogging through 162 games.
You're right about that. You're going to end up playing the same competition. It's like in Little League, you only play the teams in your Little League division. You don't go outside of that until later on.
Right.
So you have you're going to play the same 9 teams over however many games there are. If you're split in 3, it's not going to be the true competition. I get that we're not going to get 162 games, and I get that baseball is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's about playing all those games. It's about slogging through. It's not a short-term thing. As we'll see, if baseball starts and plays 80 games, 81 games, just say a half a season, that season is not going to come out the way 162 games do. A team that only wins 60 games in a season or 70 games, all of a sudden in an 81 game season, that's a great season.
Yeah, they're at the top. I have a question too about splitting between, we talked about the Arizona bubble and all the teams being there, but now you're bringing in, and obviously the Diamondbacks would be there because everyone's in Phoenix. But now, if you're looking at those, Houston and Arlington, and I think at St. Petersburg, Florida, and obviously Phoenix, do those teams, do the Astros get to play in Houston? Or I don't think they should. I don't think the home team should be able to play at their home field because then I know there's no fans, but it still gives them a little bit of an advantage.
I think probably even a bigger advantage because look at Arizona. How many times have you watched a game? Well, you can't watch them because you're blacked out, but
right.
But how many times have you seen, any times that you've seen a game, I know I've watched a few of them, that the number of Dodger fans when the Dodgers play the Diamondbacks is huge.
Oh, yeah. I think last season, just when I've looked at replays, there were probably more Dodger fans in the stadium than Diamondback fans.
Well, I think it may be a bigger advantage for the team that's their home stadium, even without fans, because they're there. That's the home. It gives them a different sense. Yeah,
they feel comfortable there. They know the field. They know those different things that are, maybe even oddities in the, in the outfield or whatever it may be. So that was one thing that I was thinking about was would they put those teams that would have that home field advantage there? I don't think they should if this is the way they go. Definitely not the Astros. They should be on the island.
I think the Astros should be sent to one of the back practice fields. Whenever they have home games, they have to play on a back practice field.
Right.
Like stepchildren with an evil stepmother or an evil stepfather named Rob Manfred. Who wouldn't do that? Rob Manfred would be like Cinderella's dad. He loved everything, and then once he died or went off and did whatever, then the stepmother took over. That's who we want. to be looking over the Astro.
Along with two stepsisters that just give them pain all along the way.
That would be perfect. So last week, as we talked about all of these different proposals about getting teams back on the field, one part of it we didn't really talk about was the effect on the minor leagues. Will there be a minor league season? How does this affect? Because where are they going to play? There's no place for them to play unless you put everybody in Arizona and then put all the minor leaguers in Florida so that they can play out some sort of a season. That, as far as that goes, it really looks like in any of these proposals, a minor league season has already been lost.
Yeah, pretty much. I think this is a collegiate summer league, but Cape Cod baseball league where Chris Bryant played, Aaron Judge played in that league. They've already canceled their season. And that's not, minors per se, because it's, all the college ball players go up there. But that is a good indication of what could happen for minor leagues, because you've got in the Pacific Coast League, there's 16 teams in 11 states just in that league. And the other thing about minor league baseball is they really rely upon the fans coming through the gate. That is huge for them. So playing without fans, I don't even know that would be a possibility for them.
No, I don't think, because they can't survive without them. That's like you said, that is their main source of income. They don't have TV money.
Right.
Their biggest source of income, unlike major leagues, is the fans.
Yeah, I mean, look at firework nights, bobblehead nights, or the giveaway nights, holiday weekends. Those are huge profit makers for minor leagues. In fact, the Albuquerque Isotopes, which is not that far from me, I was excited because they were going to have the actors that played Kevin and Stanley from The Office. They were going to be at the ballpark during the season.
Oh, wow.
And you could go and meet them and have your picture taken with them. And I was like, oh, that'd be so awesome. I got to get tickets to go.
You were already getting your tickets. Huh?
Yeah. I won't be able to. Hopefully they'll do it next year maybe. But I was excited because I love The Office. Yeah, those type of promotions, that gets people in the ballpark.
Well, and you look, that's the biggest thing at every minor league. When you look at a major league schedule, they have promotions through the year, giveaways, but nothing like and nothing on the level of what minor league teams will do, because they're the circus, and they're trying to draw you into the big top for the big show. That's one thing that I've wondered about in all of these proposals, whether it be for the major leagues and now as we talk about the minor leagues. Is it better financially, wash our hands of it and just say, okay, hey, we'll see you next year. Wait till next year has always been the battle cry of the teams that don't make it to win the World Series. Wait till next year.
Yeah, this is a whole season though.
But at what point does it, if you don't have fans, which is a large, whether you're the minors or the majors, that is the biggest part. Think about just a game day experience.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your tickets, whether you bought them to sit in the upper deck, whether you tried to get tickets as close to the field as you can, whether you bought them at a secondary market or you bought them directly from the team, whatever you paid for that, that's going to be a big dollar amount, especially even if you just say two people, but you have a family of four. If all four of you go to a game and your tickets all cost $40 a piece, for you to go, you've got to drive somewhere, so that you take that into account. But for me, I live 10 miles away from Dodger Stadium. I get my tickets, I go, I park. You get your parking online. It's cheaper than if you pay there. But if you paid there, then you pay your $20 to park or whatever it is. Some are more, some are less. You get inside the stadium. Now, if you just sit there and watch the game, don't get anything, then your ticket price and your parking, you're not going to go to the game and just sit there and watch the game and not have a hot dog or some peanuts at least.
Yeah, something.
A soft drink, or, some people drink beer, whatever. the beverage of your choice, a food item, and I can't go to the ballpark without stopping in the team store to see if there's something I can't live without.
So true.
All of those things, you play that in, it can be, at minimum a $200 experience just for one game. It could be greater because if you're taking, if it's just you and, and your spouse kind of thing, or just you and a friend, or two people go, is one thing. A family of 4, a family of 6, you almost got to take a loan out. And this is baseball, the most affordable of the pro sports.
That is true. Yeah, because football is for tickets.
Basketball, too.
Basketball. And you're setting up in the bloody nose seats. Yeah, that's one thing, too, I was thinking about, at least for minor leagues, because you do have season ticket holders. You do have the advertisers that are advertising, out in the around the stadium. They have their banners in the outfield. If they've already paid for the 2020 season, well, in essence, if there's no 2020 season, then they've already paid for the 2021 season. So that money it's not gone, but they've lost, that year of money, because then the advertisers, like I said, they've already paid for a lost season. That money could be rolled over to 2021 season. But on the flip side, all the promotions, that kind of stuff that they bring in, that could be saved for the next season. So maybe you save a little bit there, but
I guess that depends on if it's not specific to, a date that was important during that time. It's getting something that's specific to 2020. But those are the things. So minor leagues it seems like they're done for the season. Now, obviously, this is a big thing for the players. Because while teams have said they're going to pay them through May, minor league players don't get paid very much. They don't get paid, but only during the season. So most of them have to go, unless they get big bonuses or things like that, they have to go and find off-season jobs, as we talked about. We've talked about this previously. So it's a big deal. And as we talked about, there are other programs out there to try to help them. Let's not get hung up on the money part of it. Let's look at the bigger part as far as the MLB is concerned, development.
Yeah, that's huge.
These guys aren't going to be getting that same development because they're not around the teams. They're doing like most of the major league players are. They're all working out on their own, but they still have a connection. There's trainers from the team who are Zoom meetings and FaceTiming and all the different platforms to work with the players as much as they can, especially those that are recovering from injuries and stuff like that.
Well, I have another thought that I was thinking about is the AAA teams, they usually fly commercial, and the AA and the single A, they are usually traveling by bus.
Right, so the bus leagues.
Yeah, so trying to isolate them from the community would be difficult. So if the AA and the single A don't play, but the AAA play, because what if you do have an injury in the majors, and they want to call somebody up, those guys need to be ready to go. So how would that work?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's one thing that I've seen floated around. We heard about for baseball, and that's why I was wondering about the minor leagues, was that we heard about baseball will probably expand rosters for this season, just because of how this season is probably going to be. And we'd heard maybe in the early days about it, when we thought this might be a shorter term thing, maybe up to 30, a couple more pitchers to kind of help everybody get back up, because we knew you were going to have probably just a shorter spring training and this layoff. Now I've heard up to as many as 50. that opens up a lot of questions. And so you have minor league players, but the question is, what are you going to do with these 50 players? Is it going to be like the taxi squads where we have this group of players that's over here, they're practicing, they're playing, but they're not really a part of the full roster? The full roster will be that, let's say 30, and then you get 20 members to a taxi squad that you can call up just as you would do in the regular season when needed. Or is it a 50-man roster, everybody's on there, and they're all available to play? That helps, I guess, from the standpoint of you have the players you need, or you'd hope that you would need.
Right, for injuries, if that happened. And logistically, that's a lot of people going forward for each team. 50 players, that doesn't account for the staff, and then, what we talked about last week, everything else that it's involved: transportation, food service, hotels. Hotels isn't too big of a deal, but
we're grasping at straws on a lot of these things. And I think that we all have to realize, no matter how much we don't want it to be, is that there's not an easy solution to this. And at some point, no matter how much we all want it there, we all want baseball to come back for our own selfish reasons. We want it to come back because it'll make things seem more normal. We want it to come back because we want something else to watch that's in real time. We've watched enough classic games. I don't know how many people, probably from Twitter the other day, I was looking, how many people were so invested in the NFL draft. And, it's a big thing every year, but it was even bigger this year than it's ever been as far as viewership, is because we were all just hungering for something sports related.
Right. Yeah. Anything that's sports related.
So when we get back to it, that's going to be a tough thing. And what will really happen with the minor leaguers? Will they really get any development in the way that they get during a regular season, playing at whatever level, or being part of a 50-man roster? Is that going to? But some of those players, if not needed, may never see any time.
And then what happens with the service time? How does that work?
That was my next thought. How does the service time work? I on one side of it, I'd say I could see them saying, the league saying, these people will all be part of this, but here are some things. If they come up and play a certain amount of games, then they'll get major league service time. But I hear the union saying they're on a major league roster. Doesn't matter if it's 50 people. They were on a major league roster for the whole year, for a whole season. That should give them that year of major league time. The teams aren't going to go for it.
No. And
that's another thing that may stop this all from happening. There are too many moving parts to all these things. And I always hate that I do this, but I want to be realistic about it. I am happy to sit here and sing about sunshine and rainbows and take me out to the ball game with my bag of peanuts and my Cracker Jacks and be prepared. And well, I'm going to welcome the game back when it finally is able to come back. But realistically, you look at all the moving parts just to get it done. This is just the nuts and bolts of it to get it done. Then we've got to add in the human element of the players, of the teams, of everybody involved. Because I don't hear anybody out there talking to the umpires union.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from the umpires, which is interesting.
And I know that they're just like the players, the fans. They want baseball to come back. They want to work. This is their livelihood. But they also know, how many of them are saying, let the robo umpire do it, because I don't want to take my chance to be, close up.
True.
And then you think about it, how's all that going to work anyway? I mean, the nuts and bolts, a lot of those things have probably somebody at MLB or connected to it is working through all the minutia.
Yeah, I can just imagine a board somewhere at probably someone's basement. And you know that movie, A Beautiful Mind, and he's got everything, pinned and yarn going all over, and I can just see that. So minor leagues. At this point, I'm thinking there's no minor leagues this
No.
season.
I don't think so either. I think that unfortunately that the minor leaguers are going to suffer this year simply because there's no place for them to play.
Yeah, there aren't any domed stadiums. I mean, if that's one of the criteria is a dome stadium, well, there aren't any dome stadiums in a minor league.
Leave it as is. Everybody in Arizona, the major leagues in Arizona or Arizona and Florida, put the minor leaguers in Texas, and they can play all their games in Arlington or Houston. And on the good days, they can play them outside. I mean, there's a lot of minor league teams in Texas.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nice stadiums too.
And then you could have a system, and like you said, maybe it's only AAA, or maybe it's AAA and AA or something. That's the thing. There's a lot of different proposals, and they're not really changing a lot, but that whole Texas thing bringing in, and then it, like I said, it made me wonder about the minor leagues. So,
but I was looking through stuff, and I found a quote that Rob Manfred was on Fox Business, and he said, "From our perspective, we don't have a plan. We have lots of ideas. What ideas come to fruition depends on what the restrictions are, what the public health situation is, but we are intent on the idea of making baseball part of the economic recovery and sort of a milestone on the return to normalcy."
A lot of ideas.
Lots of ideas. No plans, just ideas. So we'll see.
From my standpoint, that's standard Manfred. I believe if you're really serious about that you're going to be a season, especially as we're getting to points where we're starting to see downtrends in things. Obviously, we don't know if once restrictions are eased, if that's going to change things, and have a spike back up again. But I would have a plan in place right now. If the CDC, if Dr. Fauci and all of those medical things said, you could probably safely, as safe as could be, have a baseball season. We know it's going to be without fans. You're up. Then what?
Yeah, then you're scrambling.
Let's throw all these ideas around.
You're back to your board.
Well, you know what? Last week we had some ideas too. They could just start doing. Right?
Yeah. I have another idea also from Planet Head.
Wait. I thought we were only doing updates on feasible.
No, this is
not the outlandish Planet Head idea.
I thought I had to put this in there. What about Thunderdome? Two teams go in, one leaves. That takes care of, because they leave. They're gone. They don't come out.
It's funny because the first thing I thought about when you said Thunderdome was I thought about domed stadiums.
Oh, right.
And I didn't see any of the new stadiums. I saw two stadiums that would have been perfect for Thunderdome. The King Dome in Seattle, the old King Dome in Seattle, and the Astrodome.
Oh, right.
Houston. The way those look, the big monolithic stadiums.
Yeah,
I could imagine that.
Perfect.
So you just go in, and now how does that work?
Two teams go in. I don't know. Fight to the death.
All right, Rob Manfred. You just got an idea. We don't know. Okay, so let's think about it.
It's an idea.
It is. So I guess the question is how does it work? How does it seeded so that the two teams go in, one team stays? Does that team have to stay and play until they're eliminated? So all these other teams keep coming in? It's like King of the Hill kind of thing? Thunderdome got a deal? Or is it matched up? These two teams are. So maybe you play rivalries. So the first game is Giants A's, Dodgers Angels, or better than that, Angels A's, Dodgers Giants.
Right. Yeah.
Because those bigger rivalries, that Dodgers Giants, teams like that, Yankees Red Sox. Or do you do regional things to set up those bigger rivalries? Because that Yankees Red Sox game, there's people who aren't even fans of either of those teams that will tune in to watch that series.
Right. Yeah. It's another idea, throwing it out there. And yeah, I have to dig into it a little bit deeper because, if you have two teams go in, because it's Thunderdome, when that one team that won, they would just keep going because they are in Thunderdome, they are the...
You take last year's standings.
Okay.
And you start at the bottom, work your way up. So the first game out would be the two worst teams, which like the Orioles and Tigers, right?
Yeah.
And then the next team in would be like the Marlins. And you would just start at the bottom and work your way up, and they go through. And if the Orioles or the Tigers, who were the worst teams, they continue to play, whoever wins continues to play until they're eliminated all the way up to the top. So last year, the Nationals would be the last team in.
Uh-huh.
So they benefit from being the World Series champs.
Right.
The Asterisks would be the team right before them. Obviously, it would be the hardest on the teams that were at bottom, lower, because they got to keep playing.
Right, they'll play more games. Now, going back to what Rob Manfred said, we have lots of ideas. This goes along with one of their ideas of, like I talked about before, the dome stadium, because this has to be in a dome. It's Thunderdome. So it could work with the different, if we did Arizona, if you did Texas, Florida, however, it could really work.
Maybe you do it that way. You split it up. So they're playing in Chase Field.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing in Tampa Bay, because Tampa Bay's stadium would fit into that like ugly,
it would
kind of stadium.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then maybe you could do the same thing. American League does their Thunderdome in one. National League does their Thunderdome in the other.
I think that's perfect.
Builds up, and then you do the final. The final would be the World Series, Thunderdome World Series or whatever.
Yes.
And so then you'd have an American League team and a National League team. Oh, I like that. Now, how is it?
I could get on board.
How is it that we can get these ideas like this and Survivor baseball and have it in this short amount of time, have something put together that we could probably build on? And they've got a million ideas and a whole staff of people to work on it, and they still can't come up with anything.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think a new commissioner should be on his way.
All right. Well, I still haven't heard from Mark Burnett, but I'm going to call him and see if maybe we can work out Survivor baseball with the Thunderdome.
Oh, wow. That'd be insane. I don't even know.
The intensity. It just, this is the funny thing, though, when you think about it, how far we continue to go to try to get baseball back.
Yeah, just anything, throwing out, the Thunderdome. We don't need no other hero. We got Thunderdome.
We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is life beyond the Thunderdome.
Okay, let's play ball. I think that we have everyone we need. I'll be the strong arm pitcher who can throw with blinding speed. And Pete will be the catcher who squats low and pounds the mitt. And Mike will be the home run king who snarls and waits to hit one loud and long and hard and high, way out beyond the wall. So let's get started. What? You? Oh, yes. You can be the ball. So we were wondering how far we would all go for baseball content. There are plenty of sources to stay connected to the game in myriad ways.
There are so many different ways. We talked about last week with the players playing a video game, MLB The Show, and how popular that is, the Dream Bracket. Dustin May, a shout out to Dustin May, best hair in baseball.
Right. It's funny, all of the things. If you look at MLB.com or like on the @BatAt that I'm looking at, all of the stories that are covering the news feed, that are their feed there, are most of them are all about things like that. They're not, obviously there's no games, which, by the way, the opening poem there was from Shel Silverstein, and it's called Play Ball. Yeah, he's always been one of my favorites. When you look through it, all of these different things, like you mentioned those games, you know, who's each team's fiercest rival right now? That's something that they probably would have done anyway because they do stories like that, but that's all they have. So there's not a lot of, obviously there's no baseball stories, but the real story of MJ's baseball career, it's a timely story now with the whole documentary series on ESPN about MJ.
I even saw best mustache. So
yeah, best
Christian
facial
Yelich.
hair.
Yeah. And then compared to mustaches through the years, you know, Raleigh fingers.
Right.
Christian Yelich has a long way to go to get to that stature, but I guess he's on his way. Oh, the other thing too is, I think I texted you about this, was what would your baseball nickname be? Yeah. And I was Little Cannon and you were Old Cannon, which was perfect.
But it's funny because there's all those different ideas and it's all got to be connected to baseball somehow. We don't care what it is, like with the best hair in baseball.
Right.
Why? Any other time, who cares? But we don't have anything, so we're reaching out for things.
Right.
You know, I mean, there are some things, like occasionally on the team pages, they'll have an update about how the team's staying together, what they think's going to happen when baseball starts, things like that are good for information. But right now we're getting a lot of the baseball entertainment content because there's no baseball. And how long can we talk about some of the proposals and things? Once it's out there, if there hadn't been an update about the Texas thing or Thunderdome, would we have talked about updates?
Yeah, we would talk about something else.
We would have had to come something else to talk about.
Yeah, thank goodness for Texas and Thunderdome.
So there's a lot of stuff out there that you can find if you're looking for baseball content of any kind. On baseball-almanac.com, there is a myriad of things. I mean, it's a treasure trove of information about the game.
Isn't that where you found the poem?
I found a lot of poems. That particular one is probably on there somewhere, but I also have the Shel Silverstein books, so it's easy to find.
But that just shows that website, it's everything baseball related. Poems are even on there. So
right.
If you're a poet.
If you got a baseball poem, submit it. But there's history of the game, including college baseball, managers, a lot of different information about opening days, drafts, ballparks, talk about the players, and then other things. Looking at it right now, it says U.S. presidents and quotations. Here's one, Dwight Eisenhower's quote, "I wanted to be a real Major League Baseball player, a genuine professional like Honus Wagner."
Yeah, so there's a lot of good information stuff, and you learn stuff about baseball.
Right. I think a lot of times baseball is a very historical game.
It is.
And I think you get an idea by going back and looking at those things. and you reconnect with something with baseball, or you get a deeper sense of it. You and I grew up with this deep sense of baseball. Not
Yes.
everybody did that.
Right.
We in general, because of the way we grew up, our connections, with our dad and our, one of our grandfathers being in the military. Our other grandparents were working in aircraft plants during World War II. So the history of our country has always been a big thing. And we learned how to read news to get information that we needed about things that our dad couldn't tell us about.
Right.
But we got this sense of history from the game, and not everybody gets that. I think a lot of people think this is a boring game, they're just watching a game and seeing somebody standing in center field because they don't know the game. They're not watching the game. They're not involved in the game. They don't have the sense or the feel of it. And I know it's not for everybody, just like all sports. There's sports, no matter how many times you watch it, you're just never going to get into it or never going to become a fan of.
Yeah, like curling. I cannot become a fan of curling.
Oh, you're missing out. That is like the most
I'll try
awesome
it again.
thing.
I'm sure I can find some reruns somewhere to watch.
Curling is awesome. That website alone, I didn't realize how much was on there. I'd gone there a few times and looked stuff. And when I started digging deeper, I started finding more things that it's, people will say they got on and they went down a rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole website. Baseball-almanac.com. There's other websites like we talked about, the MLB.com website. The teams all have their website, Dodgers.com, AngelsBaseball.com. One that I know you and I, we both subscribed about the same time, The Athletic.
Yeah, that's a great, well worth the money, a great site. You've got great writers on there. Ken Rosenthal is right on top of it, and lots of different articles. I read that. That's one of my sites that I go to every day.
Yeah, I do that every day. I get the email every day, the little newsletter email. I look at it. I go and look at things, but I check it every day, and for all the sports. But the nice thing is they have national reporters or writers that'll cover the MLB in general, any of the sports in general, and then you have local writers, and a lot of times you have more than one local writer. So
Right.
You'll have for every team. It does cost a little bit, but it's not that much. And if you want good content, worth it to pay for certain subscriptions. I pay for that. I have the LA Times and the Orange County Register just because they write a lot of stuff about the Dodgers and the Angels in those. The LA Times more because that's the big paper in my area. So it's nice. And sometimes I'll read articles in other papers, and if they ask if I really want to get into it, I'm enjoying what I read all the time, I'll even subscribe there because it's worth supporting that journalism that's at a higher level than just reading, you and I coming up with stories and posting them on our Facebook page.
True. Yeah, I subscribe to the LA Times. Their digital version. I get paper every morning, and mainly for the sports. Yeah, I mean, looking for different ways to connect with baseball, and I'm the same way. The Athletic, LA Times, even and just looking through other papers around the country. If it's something that piques my interest, then I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper and go that extra mile.
You sent me a story the other day that was from the Des Moines paper.
Yeah, they were talking about, that was a story about the minor leagues and how that could affect different teams. But I would say there's a lot of things obviously on the internet, the way it is now. You can find not just your team's site, Dodgers.com, AngelsBaseball.com, but fan sites. And it's serious. They're taking, for Dodgers, for instance, Think Blue, Dodger Nation, Dodger Yard, those type of things where they're putting out content And yeah, sometimes it is, hey, guess what? Dustin May won best hair, and we're all excited because we're Dodger fans. That's a win for us, right?
Right. And that makes sense because it's all Dodger content.
Yeah, that's all it is. So
It's mixed in among other Dodger things. But when the national media, when MLB.com, that's the biggest thing they have going on, or at that moment, or one of the biggest things. And when you look at the top three, it's best hair, dream bracket, and the Players League.
Right.
And like we said, we understand why. It's just how much farther are we going to go? Who's got the greatest big toe in the National League?
Or the American League, I don't know. Well,
Who had the most ear hair in the 20s?
Or nose hair, I don't know. Let's say
This
by the
Yankee
end
legend is not only a Hall of Famer, but he has the most nose hair ever.
Well, maybe if we look at the flip side of this, I would say the optimistic side, if we go through all this content because we have this time on our hand and we crave baseball so much, then hopefully we'll come out even smarter about baseball or more knowledgeable about baseball. Maybe that history, because maybe even the casual fan that is missing baseball, you know, the occasional games they watch, but it's maybe they're learning something new. So yeah, something out there.
You mentioned the Dodger sites.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed, I was looking around just to kind of see, because I listened to a few podcasts, you listen to a few podcasts, we overlap on some of those. I was looking, and one thing I noticed about podcasts, with all of them that are out there, you can go to your favorite team's website. Mm-hmm. So let's say I go to angelsbaseball.com, click on fans on their page, and then it'll have a thing about podcasts and other things. When I go to the Dodgers page, they don't have podcasts listed because there's not team connected podcast. Like with the Angels, Trent Rush, who works with the Angels, Artie Moreno owns KLAA, which is 8:30 a.m., and that's the Angel station. They do Angels games. They also do the Ducks hockey team games, among with some college sports. But they do games. They do Madden Mondays, which is basically just taking Madden. Joe Madden shows up on Roger Lodge, the old Blind Date host. Oh. He's a big sports guy, huge Angels fan, grew up with him. He joins him every week on Monday, or every Monday on his afternoon show, and they talk that. And so they put that up as a podcast, which is not an unusual thing. Live things then getting posted as podcasts for you to go back if you missed it or you want to re-listen.
Nice.
When I look to the Dodgers, there isn't anything like that. And I realize it's because the Dodgers have so many outside sources that do podcasts. There's a whole Locked On network, and you can find podcasts for all the teams.
Right.
Locked On Dodgers, Locked On Angels, Locked On Padres. All of these are there, and it's a daily thing. I do believe a couple of them that are dailies, and that may be one of them, have gone from 5 days a week to maybe 2 or 3. Just because there's just not a lot of content. So what are we going to talk about every single day?
Yeah.
How many times can we go over the top 20 first basemen in the history of your team? But the Dodgers have all of those. I believe that, you mentioned Think Blue LA. They have one. There was one we were listening to, Incline Dodgers, Dodger Yard, Dodger site for a long time. They do a lot of Twitter posts and they have their website. They just did their very first podcast.
Yeah. There's a lot to wade through. So if you're looking for Dodgers only, you can find it. Angels only. Pretty much every sports team, or let's say MLB, probably even, going further, NBA, NFL. They have something out there that's going to keep you interested.
You go back to The Athletic, they actually have a couple of them. You go to their podcast, and they have podcasts not only from a national sense, they have it from every league. So you can
That's
get an
true.
NBA. If you go to baseball, they have some that are national, like Jason Stark, Hall of Fame baseball writer. He has one called Starkville. If you go on to The Athletic and go to podcasts, they're all there, and you can find tons of them.
Yeah, and even if you're interested in fantasy, fantasy leagues, there are podcasts about that too.
Probably more fantasy league podcasts than there are regular baseball podcasts.
Yeah.
And fantasy league is big across the board. So if you looked at football or basketball, you'd probably see a lot of fantasy league because people want to get into that. They want to figure out what's the best player. The competition drives all that content. So, and what are they doing right now? I didn't even stop. I should have stopped to look in and see what a fantasy league, Roto World podcast about baseball is doing right now.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. We should talk about that. I did fantasy league a couple of years ago with a group, and because I was lower down, like I didn't get to pick first or anything like that, but I did get that year. I had Manny Machado, and I was like, "Oh, this awesome Manny Machado," when he was with the Orioles. But then he came over to the Dodgers, and then that was the end of my love for Manny Machado. So I did not do well in the league. I don't remember who else I had players wise, but I haven't played fantasy baseball since.
And there's another thing that we're missing out on for the love of baseball is without a game, there is no fantasy sports.
True. Yeah.
So those are little things. That's why I know we're ready to drink the sand. That's how much we want this content. And that's why we're talking about all these different things, the different ways you can find content, kind of, looking at some of the ways that some of the content that's out there, like the best hair competition. And I'm really impressed. The minute that I saw that, I think I saw it with one of the Dodger sites, and they posted a picture of Dustin May was competing. I was like, why are we even having this? Dustin May wins hands down. I couldn't even think of one other player, not since like the 70s with Oscar Gamble and that tremendous, that glorious fro that he had. Has there been hair like he would beat Dustin May in current players?
Well, maybe that could be the next step.
All-time hair.
All-time hair.
Started off with current players.
Yes.
Now we need to go to all-time hair.
Yes, we go through the different
Call MLB.
eras.
This on the another podcast as far as the Angels go. The Angels and a lot of teams, they have one podcast here, one podcast there. Some of it's generated by the team. There's one I listen to. It's called Talkin' Halos. They seem to be the bigger one out there. They've got about a year under their belt, I believe. And from what I listened to, it wasn't too bad. If you're right now, the last episode that I listened to was about, they're talking about the art of pitching. They were specifically talking about Andrew Haney. And it wasn't just about, oh, he's a good pitcher, or here's where his downfall is, and he's potential to this. They were getting into specifics. They were doing comparisons to other pitchers. I think they compared him in parts to like Chris Sale, talking about his pitches, his arsenal, spin rates. So if you're really into those kind of stats, if you get real geeky about those things, then it was a great podcast from that standpoint. And for me, I like stats, but somewhere along the way, the stats of my youth, which were easy, got replaced by stuff like war, that you need to have an advanced degree in everything to figure out. All of the mathematics, and you probably need some physics and some chemistry and you know,
biology, like our human and
biology,
anatomy or something, so you can figure out, muscles and all
and
that good stuff.
probably a degree in Russian literature might even help
I
in
know.
that somehow. I don't know.
War. What is it good for?
All right, Elaine. Absolutely nothing. I can't say absolutely nothing because we know that all of the stats in baseball rotate around war these days.
Yes.
Obviously, we'll never exhaust the amount of information out there like podcasts or people who write blogs, fan podcasts. There are a lot of things out there. What I did notice in this research was that there are some teams that have podcasts that have been going for quite a few years and they've stayed strong. I noticed in other places where it'd be, oh, that looks like that could be an interesting podcast. I'd go there. The last episode was 2007. I didn't even know we were podcasting in 2007.
I didn't either. Wow.
You
They
know,
were ahead of the game.
yeah, and so there's some of them they just for whatever reason we don't know why, but they just didn't stick or the people stopped. So like you said, go out there, search, find a podcast for your favorite team, and then listen to a mix of the pros who are doing it. Aren't Joe Davis and Oral Hershiser doing
Yes,
podcasts?
yes. They have a podcast now.
You've got those guys who are pros. Victor Rojas, who does the Angels play-by-play with Mark Kubica on TV, he's doing one. I haven't listened to his yet. Some of the players, Ross Stripling, we know, has one.
Yes, big swing.
Right. So go find some of those that are and mix them in. So you get other people that are doing like fans who are doing podcasts like us.
Yeah.
And then find people that the players that are doing them because they have access to the other players and they have insight that we don't have. Listen to the pros, the Jason Starks, the Joe Davises and Oral Hershisers of the world. All these guys who are doing it. Buster Olney does one with ESPN. And they have the other big guy names in baseball writing and broadcasting on their shows. You get a bigger sense of what the game is from a fan perspective to the professional writer, professional broadcaster, and a professional player. Gives you a much wider scope. Of course, right now, how many times can I tune into some of these to hear all these other things that aren't about baseball? You got to diversify, don't you?
I think so. There are a lot of different podcasts out there on all types of subjects. Pick a subject and it's probably out there. I know one that I just started listening to, and it sounds kind of geeky, but I really do like history, and it's called Backstory, and it's a podcast from the Virginia Humanities. And so these are professors of history, and everything's accurate, but it's entertaining. So, and they have some stuff on there about baseball too, but so they take things from the headlines today and look back at history. The obvious one would be, pandemics and in the past and things like that, but it's really interesting. The other thing that I really like to listen to.
Hold on a second. Before you say it, because it just reminded me when you talk about history, there is a program or a company, and you said the professors in that.
Yeah.
It's called Great Courses.
Yes.
And both of us, and I not to cut in too much, but this works with what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Great Courses has a lot of different courses, and it's all historical. Not all historical, but there's a lot of history. There's a lot of current events. There's stuff about pandemics on there as well. They had a course called Play Ball, The Rise of Baseball as America's Pastime. The guy who does it is Bruce Markuson, and he's the director of something there at the Hall of Fame. I think digital content and education
outreach.
or something like that. Yeah. And he does a really good job. It's about 24 episodes or about 30 minutes a piece. Talk about baseball content. This last one that I was listening to, they were even talking about how we got to the point that baseball was even called baseball.
Yeah, what's the evolution?
And all of that story, it's fascinating. Even if you're not into baseball, just to get the history of things. All right, so back to podcast. You were talking about the one you were listening to that was historical, and you were about to mention another one when I rudely interrupted you about Great Courses.
No, that is fine. So The majority of podcasts that I listen to are all crime related. So murders, mystery kind of thing. I'm the one, I like listening to that stuff. And there's one that's called To Live and Die in LA. And it's
Wait. Is that about the Dodgers bullpen?
No, it is not. It may
that could be a
sound
baseball and a crime. It's a baseball crime podcast.
It is. No, To Live and Die in LA. It's a crime. It's a crime podcast. But it's one of my favorites that I like to listen to because it takes you through the whole, this girl goes missing and everything that happens and all these people that they talk to. It's a journalist that is doing this. But yeah, that's the majority of my, besides learning about, the history, besides listening to all the baseball podcasts, is my crime podcast that I really like to listen to.
I listen to a lot of music more than I listen to anything else. For a long time, I used to listen to this podcast talking about history called Hardcore History. They don't come out weekly, but he talked about like the Roman Empire. And he's talking from the beginning till the end. He's not just doing us, everybody knows Julius Caesar. He's talking Julius Caesar's towards the end compared to, and he goes in there into depth. Genghis Khan. I was riveted by all these things because you know them, but how many of us know our history from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
I was just thinking that, how he goes in the sporting goods store.
Right. He's getting some new gear. He was like, I could have been even more barbaric with this. And I'm going to definitely check out to Live and Die in LA because I want to know what they think about the Dodgers bullpen as well. In addition to those types of podcasts, I think the podcasts that I see that are the most popular tend to be pop culture type podcast, political. And then anybody who's famous that has a podcast has a popularity beyond most other podcasts.
So one of the podcasts that it's pretty new, I think it's almost probably started around the same time we started ours, is Courtney Turner's podcast, Holding Court. She is the wife of Justin Turner, the third baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And listen to, I think, 3 episodes. It's pretty entertaining. They have a lot of stuff they talk about, or that she talks about, is the Dream Center and what the JT Foundation is doing. So they do a lot of charity work, which is great. But they do talk about what they're doing and things they're watching and shows they're catching up on. And one thing, a connection, I guess I kind of feel with Courtney, is she is kind of into the crime thing too. So maybe she one day could have a crime podcast, and maybe it would start in the Dodgers bullpen. I don't know.
Well, and she's got that inside connection.
Right.
Justin, who's been on all of these episodes so far that I've listened to as well. There's the 5.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing with this podcast is it's a great platform for them to get people interested in volunteering or donating to the Justin Turner Foundation, the Dream Center, or looking for things in their local area that they might be able to help with. And the other thing when I was listening to this is it's like I could have dinner with this couple, with Courtney and Justin Turner. It would be really a fun evening, be friends with them. So it's very personable when they're just talking about everyday things like they're watching Tiger King.
And they were also talking about having a game night over Zoom, a Zoom game night. Holding Court, as much as I didn't really want to like it because I knew it started about the same time, and then all of a sudden I looked and, she's got more listeners than we do. I was like, well, but listening to it, it's engaging, obviously, because Justin Turner, I'm a fan of Justin Turner. His wife sounds good. They say it's fun. It's a great platform for the Justin Turner Foundation, which I believe does need to be promoted out there in any way it can. But it's also a nice little look into the life. I think we know that we're captivated by celebrity. And anytime that we get the chance to look into, but like pulling back the curtain to see what's going on behind the scenes, the real life of these people.
Yeah. And I think that's what most people want. They just, they feel like their own lives, whatever, it's not as exciting maybe as what they may think other, like these celebrities' lives are. Yeah, to find out that Justin and Courtney are binge watching these Netflix shows while we're all in quarantine. It's like, hey, I'm doing the same things. Yeah, you kind of feel connected there. Yeah, so that's a good one to check out.
All right. So one more thing. It's a baseball or a sports podcast, mostly baseball, that I forgot to mention. And I really got to shout out to these guys because my very first podcast ever, they invited me to come on and talk about the Angels. Not because I'm an expert, but they just put a thing out looking for fans. You sent it to me. Yes. And I said, I'm an Angels fan. That's all I said. And they wrote me back. It's the guys over at Too Much Pod Tar, which is a play off of George Brett having too much pine tar on his bat, that one. And go check them out. Too Much Pod Tar. You can find them on Twitter. You can look it up, Google it. And they do a pretty good show. They do a lot of them. They did a 30 pods for 30 teams. So they talked about all the different teams, which was nice because I pulled in and I got to hear people like me who were fans of a team talk about their team versus having an expert. But they do have those on too. There's a good amount of information, and it's from a lot of different sources to give you a good idea. They're good guys. So check that out. Too Much Pod Tar, and thanks again to them for starting my podcasting career.
Yes, thank you. I'm riding the wagon.
We like our dogs with mustard and relish. We got a great pitcher, what's his name? Well, we can't even spell it. We don't worry about the pennant much. We just like to see the boys hit it deep. There's nothing like the view from the cheap seats.
Well, it looks like the other shoe has finally dropped. The Red Sox report about their alleged cheating has finally been released. And it concluded that the Sox sign stealing was all on the video replay operator, JT Watkins, who has since been suspended for the 2020 season, and not allowed to return to that job in 2021. So technically, they could restart this scheme back in 2022, I guess. Not only that, but they lost a second-round draft pick. Oh, my God.
Which...
The ruin of the team.
It could come into play, possibly, with this season's draft. I mean, it's for the 2020 draft, so if it's shorter, who do you pick? I don't know. It's not a big deal.
No, and then they did, in this report, in this punishment, they also suspended Alex Cora for the 2020 season, but not for what happened with the Red Sox, but for what his part was in the asterisks punishment of the 2017 team, since he was the bench coach there. So he finally got his punishment. And it's kind of funny because as far as we know, nobody on the Red Sox was thinking about doing stuff like this until Alex Cora showed up.
Right. And that's what gets me is, okay, he gets punished for his part in the Astros cheating scandal. But to me, it's total common sense, and you just put the parts together. He had to have had something. He had some part in this, because why would he go from the Astros as a bench coach, go to the Red Sox, and I'm not doing that here.
Right.
When it worked, I mean, it wasn't as egregious as, banging on trash cans and things like that. But
Right.
it's still cheating.
It was a more intricate system that they had going on, and it evolved from banging on a trash can to allegedly using buzzers
Right.
and other types of things. So the Astros were spending as much time practicing and playing baseball as they were coming up with ways to steal signs.
Right.
The Red Sox, and this is interesting because John Henry, the owner of the Red Sox, told the Boston Globe, which, by the way, he owns that too,
Of
that
course.
he didn't think that, or he said cheating didn't help that much in 2018. Now, I will admit that that was the one year. Now, when the Dodgers lost to the Astros in 2017, I felt like the Dodgers fell apart. Obviously, we found out later there was issue, but I felt like the Dodgers were the better team.
Yes.
In 2018, the Red Sox started out of the gate strong. They led wire to wire and they won it all. It was hard to say, well, the Dodgers almost got swept that year in 2018, right? So it was easier to say, okay, the Red Sox, they were definitely the better team. They had that. Now, obviously, we have this out, and that cast a shadow over everything. But I read something the other day that said, because if you don't know how this worked, the guy, it wasn't happening always in real time. He's sitting back there. How many challenges are there in a game? Or how many times do they look? Even if they look often, there's not a lot of times. It's not like an NFL game where almost every play is being looked at for a challenge.
Right.
So he has time. He's got to constantly watch the game anyway. So he found out a way to steal the signs using the electronics, the video feed.
Right.
And then it gets relayed out. And then instead of there being trash can banging or somebody in the bullpen taking a hat off or putting a hat on or, dancing like a monkey or whatever, or a buzzer, so the players who, once again, were all granted immunity, would get the information, and if they had a player on second base, it would be relayed to them, who would relay it into the hitter, which I think they were thinking, if we do it that way, then it just looks like our runner on second has been able to pick up the signs.
Right. That's what I was thinking too.
Then I read something the other day, and I don't remember what the source was, but that without players on second base as a team, the Red Sox hit about 250 as a team, which isn't bad. But it jumped up to like 295, I think it was, with a runner on second base. Now, I get some players do good with runners in scoring position, but not a whole team didn't jump 40 points with runners in scoring position.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't seem like that would happen. And it does say, I think it said that when the runner was on second base, that, that's when it was utilized, but it was 19.7% of plate appearances did they use this scheme. But that still is a lot, because anytime you're trying to manipulate the game, that's too much. Doesn't matter the percentage.
It's funny you say that, because David Ortiz, Big Papi,
yeah,
he thinks that the punishment was not fair. In fact, that's his quote. The punishment was not fair. He said, everybody's doing it, but to go to exactly what you just said, he said, it's hard. It's a hard game to play. That's why everybody's cheating.
It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.
I think maybe Big Papi should just not speak. Maybe he doesn't need to talk anymore. I mean, he's kind of a fun guy in the postseason, taking selfies with everybody, but why would you say that?
Because I get from the standpoint that he thinks it's no big deal, and he's a Red Sox guy,
Yeah.
and I get it. He owes the Red Sox a lot. When he got shot, they brought him to Boston. They made sure that he got the best care. But for John Henry to say he didn't see that it helped that much, anything that helped that wasn't part of the organically part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll even go with that they got better hitting through watching themselves on video. Tony Gwynn used to go back after every at-bat and look at his at-bats and go through the video. Now, obviously, it was a different system when Tony Gwynn played.
Right.
And we didn't have people just sitting there watching a screen for a whole game. But it obviously helped. So Rob Manfred, who I believe more and more hates baseball.
I would agree. I think most people do.
In his report, he said, I do not find that then manager Alex Cora, the Red Sox coaching staff, the Red Sox front office, or most of the players on the 2018 Red Sox knew or should have known that Watkins was utilizing in-game video to update the information that he had learned from his pre-game analysis. Manfred wrote in Wednesday's report, which is whenever the report came out. Communication of these violations was episodic and isolated to Watkins and only a limited number of Red Sox players.
Yes, I guess I know that there will be people that will go and look at every single Red Sox player like they did with the Asterisks and see, okay, they started here and go through all of the statistics to see, could we possibly find who knew? The other thing too, that wasn't mentioned, but this happened in 2017, is the Apple Watches. They had already been had a slap on the wrist. I don't even know if they got a slap on the wrist. They had a warning from Manfred about using Apple Watches to relay signals. So something was going on even in 2017.
Now,
and was there a connection between Cora and with the Astros doing his thing with the Red Sox even in 2017? And
so Cora came in and said, you guys are already on the right track.
Yeah.
Let's expand upon this. Wasn't there with the Boston, with the Red Sox and the Yankees and that Apple Watch thing? Yeah. Wasn't there something that came out? There was suspicion thrown on the Yankees as well.
I think so.
And I think that kind of muted the overall response to it from the league. Kind of saying, well, tit for tat, you guys were both kind of doing something you shouldn't have been doing, so no more. And there wasn't anything. It's just like going back to the steroid era. For a long time, all this stuff, everybody got uptight about Mark McGwire and Anderson Dione, which wasn't on a forbidden list. It wasn't on a banned substance list, so why would you care?
Right. Well,
I think the same thing happened here. They're not on there was no policy about it at that moment.
Right. And I just looked it up real quick, and the Red Sox were fined, and the Yankees also had to pay a fine in the whole investigation. The Red Sox used an Apple Watch to steal signals from the Yankees, and because there was a trainer that was relaying the message to the players. But it also said that the Yankees had also been earlier, not in this particular when they were playing the Red Sox, but they had also violated a rule involving the use of the dugout phone in a prior season. So not even in 2017, but they did something wrong, but you did something wrong too. So you need to pay for it, kind of thing. Yeah, right. Tit for tat.
I know people they've been trying to do things like this for years. And there's always been somebody, like anything, building a better mousetrap.
Mm-hmm.
What's a more accurate way? It seems as though, as we stand now, the Astros, as far as we know, had figured out the better ways and used it more often.
Yes.
Here, with the Red Sox, they said they didn't think it happened throughout the 2018 season. They didn't think it happened in postseason, nor did it happen in 2019. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. I have a hard time believing that they didn't continue on with it in some form, unless somebody said, no, let's not do it because of this. To me, it seems like they would be just like the Asterix and continue to evolve into a better system.
Right.
And find ways to try to be as undetectable as possible. So I don't see that, all these things where I know you're gonna stand up for your team.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know this is going to happen. Nobody has ever said that people weren't going to try to gain a competitive edge.
Right.
But until recently, the competitive edge had been limited to singular players.
Mm-hmm.
Knuckleballers taking their nail file because they keep their nails short and filed down to hold the ball. But how many times was it Joe Necro or Phil Necro that take it out of his back pocket and then tosses the emery board to the side so that it's not that? Spitballs. There's a good scene in Major League where one of the older pitchers takes off his jersey and he's got Crisco and something, and he goes sometimes if the umps are watching me close, I'll rub a little jalapeno on my nose to get it running, and then I'll just wipe my nose. And Charlie Sheen's like, you put snot on the ball? Hey, I'm working on everything that I can get to get what I need. We know those things have happened. We know things have been outlawed. We know that when we got to, there's all these people that are talking about how if you're going to punish all of these players for cheating with the sign stealing, what about all of the guys who didn't get any punishment for steroids? Number one, unless you caught them, it's hard. And it was all individual.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire introduced the whole Oakland A team to steroids, and as a team they all went out there and then went on a 10-year run, a dynasty run, or anything like that. Any of the players that we know that definitely tested positive or who have come out and said that they definitely took them, it was them. It was a singular thing. Mm-hmm. We do know though that a lot of these players were doing it. So was there ever a competitive advantage like sign stealing?
I mean, other than, you had Canseco and McGwire hitting, massive amounts of home runs, but they weren't winning World Series championships, I guess.
But you still have to hit the ball?
Yeah, that's
what happened with Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds, when he wasn't getting walked, he was hitting home runs. I saw him hit in Game 2 of the 2002 World Series. I was in the perfect spot looking down the left field line to see him hit, when they finally pitched to him, a monster home run. And at that moment, I was just in awe. The biggest thing that happened was those guys, their competitive edge was more that they were less issues with injury.
True.
Bottom line is, you still had to hit the ball.
Yeah, you still have to play. So that's true.
And that's the thing. When obviously you still have to play the game, but imagine if Barry Bonds, or let's say Mark McGwire, who started that whole home run chase with Sammy Sosa, if those guys are on, number one, I don't think anybody should have ever given them grief for anything, because that home run chase that year helped bring baseball back from the '94 debacle.
Yeah, it really did.
So he should be given a pass to whatever extent because he helped. We were all enthralled that year. People who didn't even care about baseball were enthralled.
Mhm.
This whole thing, imagine if those guys had been getting the information that we're told the Astros and the Red Sox got. Whether it was just a few players or all players, imagine if those guys knew every time they went up exactly what was coming, or just before the pitch was coming, they got a buzz or a trash can hit, or somebody's blinking a light in a scoreboard, or whatever has ever been said about things.
Mm-hmm.
How many home runs would Mark McGwire have hit that season?
Yeah.
How many did he end up hitting? 70?
Yeah, something like that. It's crazy.
He would have hit 100
amount.
plus home runs that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Bonds would have come along with that same information and hit 200.
Yep. Yeah. Right. One thing that I have been thinking about too, and to me, it does. I could do with or without it, is the replay. The challenge. Because the replay that camera was used so heavily, especially for Houston. Is that something, I don't think they're going to take it away, but they've been talking about different restrictions on it. There's only, certain, somebody that's in there, but this was one guy too. So you can't have one person, what are they going to be licensed and bonded to look at the replay
I think that,
camera?
Right. I think that the people who are in the replay room are always team. Each team has their own person in there.
Right.
I think it has to come from the league.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It has to be somebody neutral. So it could be, I don't know that it has to be somebody from the umpires league because I don't know that they would be neutral if they're, going along with
right. No, it has to be a neutral third party, not part of anybody that's on the field that is in the game. But it can't be John Henry's nephew. It can't be somebody that's that tied to it.
Yeah, somebody almost. I was gonna say almost like the Oscars. I mean, where they have the independent accounting firm. I mean, they did screw up once, but
so Deloitte and Touche are now the official firm of MLB replay, dugout replay or whatever.
Yeah.
But we could get it. You could get a team and send out 3 people, just like an umpiring crew.
Mm-hmm.
And on game one guy or one person, male or female, whoever, one replay viewer is in the home team, one's in the visiting, and there's a third person who's a backup, and then they rotate just like the umpires do. We ask you up front, who's your team? You say the Dodgers, you'll never do a Dodgers game.
Yeah.
So that way our rotation is never, or we go down and we get a bunch of people who hate baseball and just tell them, watch, does it look like it? And give an honest assessment. There you go.
That's a good idea.
Especially, we're going to need jobs apparently after this whole shutdown.
Yes.
We've just created
all these jobs for MLB. Another idea for the MLB Beautiful Mind Board that is going on in somebody's basement.
We got just a bunch of ideas.
Just a bunch of ideas. That's it.
That's it for this week's Sibling Rivalry Baseball Podcast.
Remember, you can find us on our website, siblingrivalrybb.com. Also on Facebook, Instagram at Sibling Rivalry BB.
As well as Twitter at Sibling Rivalry BB without the A. And you can email us to show@siblingrivalrybb.com.
Join us next week as we discuss ways to get the most out of a possible 2020 baseball season.
And we continue our search for Josh Fields.
You're out!